and so we need to adjust our paradigm a bit there. So the idea here is that we need to develop an AI program that supports the strategy of the business and takes into account things like regulatory security, regulatory expectations, security constraints, and other ethical principles. So we're going to talk about that and how to build a strategic, policy-driven, and governance-focused AI framework. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in here? Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to be able to align our AI strategy with our business strategy and goals. We want to introduce frameworks for being able to develop AI governance, responsible AI governance, and leverage standards that have already been established and are recognized in the AI industry. And then basically what I want to be able to do is give you some actionable recommendations for how to proceed. So why do we need to align with the business strategy? Okay, so we've all been through this before in other technology evolution, and I think this is more of a technology revolution, similar to what we experienced when the internet came about. Now I'm old enough to have admittedly been around when the internet was invented, and there was similar kind of hysteria around that. And where did that end up? It ended up in the dot-com bubble. So what the key learning from that was that if you don't align the technology strategy to a business strategy, ultimately it's going to fail. And it's going to fail because it's not providing real value to the business. So we first have to ask ourselves, what is the business strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to increase revenue? Are we trying to make the customer experience better? Are we trying to reduce costs? You know, what is it that we're trying to do strategically from a business standpoint? And then how can we develop our AI strategy to support that business strategy? Risk management is also something that we need to take into account. We need to align our AI strategy with potential reputational and ethical and data security and regulatory risks, and ensure that we're taking a risk managed type of approach. And sustainability longer term is that we need to ensure the viability of AI through getting cross-functional support work across your organization, because you know, these technology initiatives, if they're perceived as being driven by the technology team, the naysayers come out of the woodworks and find ways to you know, poke holes in your strategy. So if the strategy is aligned from a business perspective, it's much more difficult for those kinds of naysayers to poke holes in your strategy. So AI should be part of your strategic planning and innovation, but again, aligned with your business strategy. All right, so what are some of the key components that we need to have aligned with our business strategy? So first of all, business alignment. Of course, we need to come up with and align with what are the OKRs and KPIs, and you know what we've done in companies I've worked for is that we align our bonuses with those objectives. So the business value determines whether or not we can be, you know, call something a success. Another aspect of this is use case prioritization, aligning the use cases based on first, business value, second, feasibility, and third, risk assessment. Okay, in that order. Okay, we need to basically prioritize the use cases, not based on what seems the coolest, but does it actually provide business value? Do we believe it has feasibility, and what are the risks associated with that? and then what regulatory security and ethical risks could be as part of this. And then vision and principles are, again, using ethical use, fairness, and transparency in how we are adopting AI. And then fundamentally, the foundation of AI, particularly machine learning and Gen AI, is your data ready, right? Is your data and your technology infrastructure ready for AI? And you need to be honest about whether or not your data has the right cleanliness. Is it secure enough? And what are some of the risks around data privacy, intellectual property, and things like that? And then the other aspect of it is your business from a personnel standpoint ready for adopting AI? Are your business teams prepared? Have they been trained? Do they understand how to leverage the AI tools? Are your technology teams ready? Do they have the right governance in place, and so forth? And lastly, risk and governance, being proactive about identifying risks and managing those risks as part of your program. So a lot of this is going to be built around different frameworks. We've adopted NIST AI 600-1. That's probably the one that most organizations will adopt, at least in the US. ISO has a similar one, 42001, I think it is. And basically it focuses on the importance of trustworthy and AI and integration with your organizational mission and values. So again, the framework is intended to assist with the adoption of AI, not necessarily impede it. All right, so what are some of the foundations of your policies that you should have in place to adopt AI? Okay, one, an acceptable use policy. Now, different companies use different approach. Most companies have an acceptable use policy for technology and IT, and you can put in a new section or sections that address AI specifically. I've chosen to have a separate AI adoption and acceptable use policy, simply because it has that much mind share. So you can, it really doesn't matter which approach you take, but as you know, most people don't read them. So the shorter they are, the more granular they are, the more likelihood you have of them reading them. You should have this as part of your onboarding and your annual refresh of your policies for your teammates. Good way to do that is through your HR platform. Typically, there's a way in there for them to have to acknowledge that they've read the policy and will adopt it. So it's good to have, start with an acceptable use policy. If you are going to be doing any development of AI models, you should have a policy around model development. What is the process? How to what kind of reviews and adherence to compliance to standards and data security and so forth. Those things need to be included there. There needs to be a data usage and privacy policy. Again, this could be a case where you just add to and ensure that your data usage and privacy policies that already exist are taking into account AI principles, or you could have separate data usage and privacy policies specific to AI. It really doesn't matter either way. And then the next one is having policies around ethical use. What are the guidelines? What are the risks that you're putting in place for your organization around the ethical use of AI and AI models? And then lastly is making sure that those policies are transparent and that they are communicated to the right people and that they have adopted them and that there's regular follow-ups on those. Okay. And then having those policies align with your existing IT and cybersecurity and compliance programs. All right, I'll pause there to see if there's any questions or comments at this point.
Bill, are you finding that most companies are not only doing a model development standard, but a model use standard? So some will adopt Copilot, some will adopt OpenAI, etc. And are most companies you're coming across standardizing on one, or do they like the ability to use many?
Most companies are picking a horse and running with it. You've got to have quite a few resources and I guess technical talent to adopt multiple models. There are some companies out there that are offering models of models, where they take prompts and then based on the prompt they're determining what model you should distribute that to. But it really depends upon your organization. Are you a consumer of AI primarily, or are you a developer and adopter of AI models? And so, first that you've got to determine that, and then you kind of and most companies are going to be in the first category, being users of AI, and that drastically simplifies your governance program and everything. But if you're going to be developing AI, then that brings in all kinds of again data and privacy issues, compliance issues, ethical issues, model drift issues. There's all kinds of other factors you have to bring into account. So you just have to determine what is your strategy from a company standpoint, and then that'll drive which approach you're going to take. And we'll talk about that. That's why I wanted to pause here and allow for some questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you were going to, the core theme of this is that with everything going on around AI, you really need to take an approach of, once you've established your business strategy and you're aligning your AI strategy with that, the very next step is you've got to adopt a governance model. Okay. And the reason for that is because there are just huge risks around the adoption and usage and the development of AI. And so you've got to manage that whole process, and having a governance model in place allows you to do that. So there's three lines of defense in a governance model. First of all, that your business and data science teams are clear on their guidelines for execution and documentation. What is expected of them for around compliance and security and aligning what they are doing with the acceptable use of AI in the company. Second line of defense is addressing risk, compliance, and ethics. Okay, you need to establish, what standards are you going to adopt, and what is your oversight mechanism for making sure that you are following those risk and compliance and ethics guidelines. And then lastly, having an internal audit, some sort of independent assurance that we are actually aligning with the first two. Okay. So what I recommend, and what's recommended generally, is that you establish an AI governance team. Okay. It's a cross-functional leadership team within the organization that allows you to evaluate and assess your business value. So first of all, their primary purpose is to assess business value and identify prioritization of your use cases and assess risk associated with those use cases. They're also going to be reviewers and approvers of your policies and other things of that nature. So but there needs to be a group, not just IT, but business leaders, including IT, including security, potentially including legal, HR, a core team that is responsible for this governance program. Okay. So what are the frameworks that address AI governance that are out there? Particularly in the U.S., so the National Institute of Standards and Technology have two frameworks that they've developed specifically to address the needs of AI. The first one is the risk management framework. It's called AI RMF 1.0. Okay, it is targeted for organizations that are primarily users, adopters of AI. Okay, people who are turning on Copilot, that are using OpenAI, things like that. If you're and you may adopt this plus next one we're going to talk about if you are developing AI, but this is primarily given or provided for basically the management of AI within your organization. So the core functions of the framework are to map, basically contextualize, can't say that, contextualize the risks across the AI lifecycle, okay, and basically identify, manage, and address your risks that you identify. Second is then to measure, quantify, and monitor your usage of AI, your adoption of AI, and basically be able to address risks around against compliance, security, ethics, and also measure, is your AI meeting your business value objectives? Then third is to manage, right, a risk-based approach, process to making decisions around the adoption and usage of AI. Then lastly, governing, where that brings in accountability and oversight of the same. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. So the second primary framework for AI is more of a AI governance framework, and I guess probably you could put in there the AI governance development framework. So this is really targeted at organizations that are developers and managers of AI, geared towards people who maybe you're going to create a RAG model on top of another public model, or you're actually developing or generating your own model for either your own use or one that you're going to provide to customers. All right, it is designed to complement NIST AI 600-1, so they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. So you can adopt both. All right, this one focuses on your policies and procedures around the development and deployment of AI. What are the roles and responsibilities of those who are participating in those procedures? What documentation and traceability is needed? And then what are you doing around continuous monitoring for, again, compliance, risks around compliance, security, data quality, model drift, and ethics? All right. Any questions about that one? Okay. So next one. Okay. So what are some of the other frameworks that are out there? This is not intended to supplant other enterprise frameworks. It really is intended to work hand in hand with other frameworks that are out there that you may have already adopted. So around the risk management of managing AI, we already talked about RMF 1.0 or AI 600-1. It aligns with NIST SB 800-53. If you're not familiar with that, NIST 800-SB 800-53 has really three levels: low, medium, and high. And you can adopt, different controls based on the needs of your company. But the controls within NIST AI 600-1 are basically align with 800-53. So it's not a bunch of new controls. Some are new, but a lot of them are just referencing already existing controls around 800-53. And then ethics and policy. So basically, the ethical adoption of AI around fairness, accountability. There's the published OECD AI principles, or ISO 42001 is more geared towards, it is similar to 600-1, NIST 600-1 for management, but it really focuses more around the ethics and policies around good adoption principles and accountability for the ethical use of AI. And then lastly, you have, of course, data protection, so data privacy. Those could be driven by GDPR, CCPA, or other data privacy principles that you have to also apply for AI. All right, any questions about alignment with other enterprise frameworks?
Yeah, just a quick question on that. There is a document called the CAIQ that's used to represent your compliance to a variety of industries, regulatory bodies. It's used in fact, it's used in your SOC certifications, and it gives you, basically, do you comply with these set of standards? Do you know if there's one specifically for AI? The one I'm referring to is for development of cloud-based software, where you're going to house people's financial data.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know that those principles still apply in AI, but I have not seen a specific similar kind of a mandate or guideline around the adoption of AI and then a certification like a SOC 2 for AI. So most companies that are AI providers are going to just point to their SOC 2 and say, well, we're SOC 2 compliant, but SOC 2 hasn't even really taken into account aspects of AI yet. So the standard making bodies, other than for what we've talked about here, haven't really caught up to where AI is.
Sure. I just wondered if you'd seen it or anything.
No. Well, that doesn't mean that again. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just I'm not aware of it.
No, I know it exists. I was just going to follow up and ask if you had utilized it or knew anybody who'd used it as a framework.
I have not. We have to be SOC 2. Yeah, we have to be SOC 2 compliant, but haven't. No, let's put it this way: nobody from our customer base has asked for anything like that yet.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
And that's typically the driver. First company that comes to us say, "Are you SOC 2 certified?" I said, "No, but we're working on it." So and until you're ready for it. So okay, so what is the life cycle of AI governance? Okay, what is kind of the process that you're going to go through to come up with an AI governance program? Okay. So in adopting AI, first of all, is the ideation and business justification phase. In a lot of organizations that I'm aware of and a lot of peers that I've talked to, some business executives say, "Hey, what are we doing around AI?" And it's like, I try to flip that and say, well, what is our business? What are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective? And that really needs to be the conversation, because again, if we're just doing AI because it's hot and other companies are talking about it and they're talking about it on the news, that's not going to get you real business value. So you really need to talk in terms of, what are we trying to accomplish? What are our business objectives? And what business value do we believe we can get out of the adoption of AI? Second, foundational is identifying the data that you are going to use for AI, ensuring that that data is clean, it's properly categorized in terms of data privacy, data risk, compliance, all those different aspects of, just what does this data mean to the organization? So tagging your data so that you identify what data are you going to use to, in your models or in your use of AI, and then preparing that so that it meets your AI needs. And then third, if you're going to be doing model development, of course, you've got to have a process in place for developing the model, developing your models. And then whether you're developing the models or you're using other models, how are you going to validate the accuracy of your AI? Because the fundamental issue and challenge around Gen AI is it's going to give you a result, whether it's correct or not. And so how do you know that its result is valid, truthful, accurate, however you want to explain it? You got to be able to know that the validation, the usage of the model is actually correct. And then what are you going to do for deploying AI in your organization, which includes training, guidelines, making sure your policies are in place and communicated. And then how are you going to monitor that? And there's two aspects of monitoring. One is operational monitoring. Is the AI working, and is it performing, and is it accurate? But two, is it being used correctly? And that's where you come into compliance and security and ethics. And then lastly is, have a plan for when you're going to transition to the next version or of model, or is the AI still working and producing the value that we expect? And what are you going to do in transitioning? This is where we go wrong in a lot of cases from a technology perspective, and we create technical debt that we, years down the road, we find that we didn't have any strategy for how we're going to sunset, archive, or transition to the next thing. So at each stage, the recommendation is you need to embed controls, you need to log what's happening. There needs to be reviews for ethical, I'd add to that, ethical compliance and security compliance, and then business impact assessments. Be really honest about, is this really meeting our business objectives? Are we meeting our KPIs? Is the business value really happening there? And be willing to, move on if something isn't providing the value, because this stuff can get expensive pretty quickly. So, all right. So, what are some of the tools and enablers that we can adopt as part of an AI adoption program? One is basically creating model cards, and basically this is creating categorization around your data, so that you know what data is being used and for what purpose, and that way you can trace whether or not you're compliant. Okay. Two is automating your machine learning and model development pipelines, and creating audit logs so you know what data is being used, what changes are happening, who made them, and so forth. And then adopting bias. This is to kind of keep in line with ethical guidelines. Finding tools that are going to allow you to look for bias and fairness and ethical usage of your models. And I'm not sure why this went dark on me, but this is adopting what's called explainable AI, and this is basically enabling human users to understand and interpret the outputs of AI. And this is where, hallucinations come into play, and being able to um, make sure that you train your users of AI in what their responsibility is for validating the output of AI results. Because if we get too confident in the AI results and we stop, interpreting or validating the results, we can get into trouble pretty quickly. Okay. There's a couple of models that are out there. One's called the line model, or local interpretable model agnostic explanation. That's a mouthful. But basically, it's a way of again monitoring the outputs of AI and checking for accuracy and compliance. And then the other one is called the Shapley additive explanations. And again, I'm not an expert in either of those, but there are models that others have developed and tools around those models for being able to help with that human interpretation. And then lastly, adopting governance platforms. We've talked about, the actual governance frameworks, but there are governance platforms in Azure. IBM has one, AWS has one, for providing you tools to govern your AI process, and in the deployment and management of your AI models. Any questions around that? Okay, let's move on to some of the recommendations around success factors for good successful AI programs in organizations. So, one, having strong C-level sponsorship, and my recommendation is that comes from a business leader, not CIO or the CTO or your technology team. Having a line that they have to be involved, but the sponsorship needs to come from, whether it's your chief marketing officer, your chief operations officer, your CFO, or somebody at the C level that sees the potential business value, is in agreement with the alignment with the business objectives, and is going to champion that amongst your executive team. Secondly, is having your policies clearly established and clearly communicated throughout your organization for those who are going to be affected by the adoption of AI within your organization. Again, establishing, I missed part of that strong C-level sponsorship, is having that governance team, that AI governance team, established and supported by the executive team, because they're going to be establishing policies, establishing your governance program, which frameworks are going to adopt, all those kind of things. And then having either an internal auditor or external auditor involved with doing regular audits and reviews of the adoption of AI, the success factors, your metrics of how you're measuring it, compliance, and so forth. And then having a cross-functional training program for your organization. I've seen a lot of organizations adopt like Microsoft Copilot or OpenAI and given everybody licenses and just turned it on, and without any kind of training around acceptable use or what's possible and how to use the tools, and so the tools go either incorrectly used or not used at all. And then lastly is having a transparent set of metrics on the adoption, the performance, and risk compliance around your usage of AI. Anybody else have any other ideas or thoughts around success factors? Okay. All right. So what is a roadmap that you can establish for establishing your AI governance program? Okay. As we've talked about a lot of these, but summarizing kind of what the process is for getting all of this in place. So first and foremost, establishing your business strategy and aligning your AI objectives to your business strategy, and how does AI allow you to achieve your business goals. And that's really the only way that AI is going to truly provide business value to the organization. Then establish your governance team, and that governance team doesn't necessarily mean that that team drafts the policies, but they're responsible for ensuring that the policies are drafted and reviewed, and they are the approvers. They're the signatories of saying, yes, this is the policy for the organization, and any adjustments to those policies have to be reviewed and approved by your governance team. They're also going to draft your procedures and your procedures associated with that. So any kind of actual workflows and things like that in either the usage or development of AI within the organization. Then thirdly, once you have the governance team and the policies and your frameworks in place, then it's time to prioritize your use cases. Now, a lot of organizations are jumping to number 3 without 1 or 2, and some have been successful, but I've seen in more cases where it's the results of the adoption of AI has been way below what was originally expected. So without the first 2 and jumping to number 3 can often lead to failure in meeting people's expectations in the adoption and value of AI. So 3 is, again, aligning the prioritization of use cases with business value, risk assessment, and feasibility. Okay. Lastly, defining your KPIs, deploying your tools for supporting the process, and then starting to do assessments once you start to put AI into full adoption. And then lastly, implementing your full governance life cycle. And this is kind of a rinse and repeat, right? Once you've gotten to step number 4, the full governance life cycle starts again with business strategy. Make sure that the governance team is keeping up to date on changes in the industry, changes in frameworks, updating policies, making sure that use cases are aligned, and tools are being, the alignment of usage and the KPIs that you established are being met. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Lastly is just as a conclusion, as we mentioned from the beginning, we need to align our AI objectives with our business strategy, ensuring value creation from the start, and doing it responsibly within the organization. And then establishing a governance program and policies right from the start. And what I've seen with a lot of organizations is they kind of, as I mentioned, they jump to step number 3. They start to adopt AI and then realize, oh, wait a minute, we don't have any governance around this. We don't have any policies. We haven't adopted any kind of frameworks or anything, and it gets bolted on after the fact. And then there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done once you establish what your governance is going to be, and then leveraging standards and frameworks to help you guide you in your maturity and progress towards full AI governance. All right, that's all I had to present. Any questions?
Hey, Bill, I have a quick question for you. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yes. Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead.
In my past company, I was kind of leading the charge in the IT group of creating governance for, let me kick my video on here. Uh, I was in charge of leading the governance for um, AI, and um, our C-suite was really slow to act and adopt, and there was a lot of pushback and this, that, and the other. And while they were hemming and hawing over what they wanted and what they didn't want, and this, and that, and the other, I ran some analytics in the background to see, well, what are our users doing? We had a global company, um, and the users were using a full smattering of all AI tools. I mean, they were already there, and they were already dumping company data into lots of different AI platforms. They weren't waiting on anyone. So in those scenarios, since we don't have the luxury of saying all AI exists in this web place. I mean, there's vendors coming out all over the place that are leveraging it. What counsel would you give to a company that has users that effectively have these products that are offered at free cost or no cost, where they can just jump on and start dumping company data into them?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, particularly in a global company, and it depends upon the maturity of your organization in regards to IT governance, right? Because some companies have said, look, they shut down access to all AI that they thought, right? Um, and and they thought that was the answer: shut down all access until we get our arms around this. Well, like you said, there are so many AI tools out there that it's kind of whack-a-mole, right? You can't shut it all down, so you got to get ahead of it. And if you don't have policies established around the proper use and so forth, and there does have to be some controls. I mean, first thing I did was say, look, if it's not on our approved software list, um, you shouldn't be using it, and it's a terminable offense if you do, right? So you make it a point of policy to kind of scare people into kind of falling in line, and then have a process as part of that policy for them to say, hey, I want to go try this tool, or I want to we've kind of, I've played with this outside work, and I think we adopt this, and have a process for review and approval and so forth. So the only thing I can recommend to you is, one, you should have tools in your environment to be able to detect these things, and ideally you have the ability to shut them off if they're not approved. And then third, get out ahead of it as much as you can and get the policies in place and the governance in place so that you can allow for people to adopt those tools, but do it in a governed and responsible way, so you can bring them into the organization. Because I don't know if I was in financial services a lot, and you just don't let things into your environment because they could cause security risks and so forth. So things can need to be reviewed and governed from that standpoint. And that applies to AI and anything else for that matter.
Yeah.
So
So in an environment where it was, and maybe I'm the odd person here. Um, our our company was very it was revolved around manufacturing, and there was a lot of people who were, I've been here 20 years, this is the way things work, whatever. And so getting individuals to act quickly was not part of their was not part of who they were, and that went all the way up to the tone of the top. So the very very top part of the C-suite, they did not move fast. So I guess my follow-up question to this was, if I see a runaway aspect, and in the future with AI, how do I wrangle the C-suite to help them to understand that they're on a burning platform, that they need to act now?
um, Well, I liken it to cybersecurity, and again, this is the business I'm in of managing cyber risk is show them, show them the risks that this potentially could open up and how it could affect the company, whether it's financial or compliance perspective or data privacy or whatever those risks are. That's where the risk assessment aspect comes into play, and tell them here are the risks we're dealing with. If you choose to ignore them, I've informed you. Okay. But here's, and of course, we'll come to the C-suite with problems, come to the C-suite with solutions and say, here's how I recommend, addressing these risks, but make them aware of the risks that they're allowing to happen within the organization by their lack of delay in action.
Thank you.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Bill,
Anybody else? Go ahead.
yeah, so this is looks like a lot. Sure. So for a startup just starting out, is there a stripped down version? Is there a version of this that isn't like you've got to have all documentation in place and everything, or is this really the bare essentials that you've given us already?
No, this is the perfect model. and as you know, in a startup environment, you pick your battles. And so what I would recommend is one, you got to get started. So start with establishing some policies, acceptable use policy, and some procedures around how are we going to govern the adoption of AI. Just get started, because it'll go like wildfire if you don't do that. Now, you will get to a point down the road where you're going to have to adopt some standards. And as a startup, if you're, I don't know what kind of startup you're in, but I assume it's some sort of a software startup.
Yeah, it's actually an AI-based software startup, so that we've got that aspect as well.
Yeah, so you will be required at some point by your customers to show that you've got some sort of governance around around your either the development of AI or your adoption of AI, and so that's kind of second phase. So I'd go back to this life cycle here. I'm sorry, where was it? The roadmap. Where did that go? Back here. No, I lost it. I can't read my own screens here. Here it is. So pick out of this what you can do, but by all means get something started, right? And I would suggest you kind of start here, at least with number 2, and get some policies in place and a team that can work together and agree upon how we're going to leverage and adopt AI.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. And I'm not presenting this as this is what I've done all the time, because the first time, the story I told at the beginning, which ended up with a massive success, okay, was kind of what I said don't do. We didn't have any policies. We were just running down the road trying to show a customer what was possible, and it ended up being such a success that they were like, okay, we need to do this, put this in production. And then after the fact, we were running and scrambling. So I learned from that without some of these things in place, you're going to be forced to do them at some point. So try to follow this model as much as possible to get those things in place before you are forced to do it, and then you're scrambling.
Do you have good examples of things that you would, as I'm asking this question, I realize it's very specific to each company, but are there examples of good policy documents out there that we could?
Yes, you can call me afterwards and we can we can talk
Okay.
about that. But yeah, you know, Chat GPT is my friend. You know,
Perfect.
start there and
Perfect.
just ask for it, right? You may not get exactly what you want, but you get a good starting point.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks. And by the way, I just reached out to you on LinkedIn and asked for your slides. So I did get my recorder hooked up and I missed the first few slides. I want to put those.
Yeah, don't worry about
Yeah, I'll
that.
send you the-
Bettina's going to send
yeah.
all these slides out. There's nothing
Awesome.
proprietary here, so she's going to send out the slides to everybody. So, okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. I have got to hop. So I appreciate the opportunity and hopefully this has been useful for everybody.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Okay.
Appreciate
All
it.
right. Good luck to you all, and
Yeah.
I'll wave as I drive by when I'm in Utah in a couple weeks. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
And then everybody else, I'll send the slides out. The one email I don't have is for PVK, whoever that is. I don't know what your correct email is. If maybe you can chat with that with me.
PVK works with me. I can forward it to him if he doesn't
Okay.
hop on and provide his email.
Okay, cool. So Clint, I'll just make sure to copy you then.
And I'll add those slides that I missed, Bettina, to the.
Okay. I'll send this to you right now, Guy.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And then next week, we're doing an open discussion. And David Sewell has agreed to do a demo around the Claude analyzing spreadsheets process using Claude.
It'll be good.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Mike, are you going to hang on for a second?
Yes.
Perfect. How about if I just call you directly, Mike? Should that be a good idea?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
Thanks.